don't.
Paradise Killer is a murder mystery detective adventure game by Kaizen Gameworks, a studio who I think share my appreciation for the works of Suda 5-1. The good Suda games, I mean, not like Lollipop Chainsaw. So, if you're familiar with Suda, you might have already inferred that the game features a cast of eccentric weirdo characters, all of whom have a tendency to speak in riddles and pepper conversation with references to a complicated alternate history that the player is expected to piece together for themselves. No one's gonna explain anything to you directly, whether that be in regards to the world you're in or the mystery at hand, and your character has no reason to ask things she already knows. What she doesn't know is what's been going on for the last 3 million days, approximately 8,200 years, to lead up to the previous night's murder of the entire Syndicate Council. Having been cast into exile for being deceived by a god on Island Sequence 13, Lady Lovedies is called out of exile in the final hours of Island Sequence 24 to determine who snuck into the council chambers and killed off everyone inside. Not only who, but how, because the way inside is secretive and elaborate. So elaborate, in fact, that everyone is just assuming the council is dead because they haven't come back out yet to be ferried out for the next island sequence. No one has actually seen the bodies yet, they can't even get inside to do so. So not only will you be working with a cast of eccentrics who refuse to give you straight answers, but you won't even have access to the crime scene without a lot of digging. In gameplay, this means exploring a huge, complex, and immensely detailed island city that's as stacked vertically as it is horizontally. There may be evidence in any one of the countless nooks and crannies, and testimony from the few people left on the island won't be enough to crack the case, not even close. On top of that secretive physical evidence, there are dozens of little flavortext relics everywhere to flesh out the world and help you piece together where the hell you even are. This ranges from the humble soda can for some cultural detail, to remnants of previous islands that hint at their individual rises and falls, to stone tablets describing the various gods worshipped by the Syndicate. Those tablets, some of the most valuable non-vital items to find, will cost blood gems to unlock, and those blood gems are scattered about everywhere, eclipsing those crucial pieces of evidence and lore in terms of sheer number. So, on your way to walking between interrogations, you'll be subtly sidetracked by glittering goodies in the distance that are, at best, crucial evidence, and at worst, still currency for all manner of things, like fast travel, traversal upgrades, and buying secrets from one of the shadier island residents. I mean, what harm is there to a little sidetrack to pick up what could be vital information? Then another when you see something else, then another until you're on the opposite side of the island in a sub-area you didn't even know existed. A sub-area that might just hold key info for an aspect of the case you hadn't even intended to investigate yet, or a side quest involving the ghost of a now-deceased citizen. And the fact that you can stumble onto any of these things in any order means you never know where you might be off to next. What this results in is a mystery that unfolds extremely organically, with the player's conscious and unconscious desires mingling constantly. Mingling to form play sessions comprised of very naturalistic bounces between different types of investigation, all of which leads to meaningful progress. All the while, you'll be bopping along to the game's diegetic soundtrack with its clear city pop influences. There are the few areas that have non-diegetic music designed to fit a more specific tone, like the pounding dubsteppy rhythm of the Dead Zone, or the isolating solo of the Desolation Cell. Credit to Epoch for an outstanding soundtrack that excellently accomplishes the Fallout-esque goal of never getting boring despite playing on an endless loop, and ostensibly comprising just one genre. And to Fiona Lynch for a fantastic vocal performance on the game's main theme. Even sitting here now, listening to the soundtrack as I write, I'm taking periodic bop breaks just to jam out a bit to some of the tracks. Above that, however, the music lends itself to the 80s Miami aesthetic you've no doubt noticed by now. And while 80s aesthetics are, in a general sense, getting dull by now, Paradise Killer uses it for an important goal. 1980s America was something of a gilded age. There was a concerted effort to make everything appear right as rain, despite, well, the things that were happening. The easiest way to sum it up would be this. Don Francis, an epidemiologist active during the HIV/AIDS crisis of the 1980s, proposed plans to the CDC for the prevention of rising infection numbers. In his words, Washington's response was, quote, "No, we're not going to fund it, and we want you to look pretty and do as little as you can." End quote. That, in a nutshell, sums up the excellently achieved aesthetic goals of Paradise Killer. In a story premised on the brutal murder of over half a dozen people, the city pop jams and beachfront apartments emphasize a hollowness in the society presented. I meant it when I said the music was diegetic. The Syndicate literally blasts city pop jams constantly all over the island, presumably to keep people happy and numb. The Syndicate, after all, are not the good guys. The island sequences exist in a pocket dimension designed to worship, resurrect, and house alien gods that once enslaved humanity. For all the beautiful architecture and sunny weather, the Syndicate is a deeply corrupt group of religious fanatics who serve blood gods. Hell, most of why the island is so empty to begin with is because every island sequence ends with the ritual slaughter of every single non-Syndicate citizen, all of whom were either kidnapped from the real world or born there as the children of those kidnapped. Every single living character you meet, with the exception of one, is complicit in that, including your own. How she sees that society can be shaped to some degree by player choice, but no choice allows the player to outright go against the will of the Syndicate. Love Dies just isn't interested. And the game isn't exactly subtle about the fact that every single one of these characters is a bastard. Some take longer to reveal themselves than others, but even the earliest pieces of evidence cast doubt on LD's closest friends, like Lydia and Sam Daybreak. What results is a feeling that no one can be trusted, not even the highest-ranking members of the Syndicate, and that feeling doesn't arise solely from one mass murder. Every character has a long, detailed history and relationships with one another, all of which paint the picture of the Syndicate as a place for paranoid backstabbers and ambitious connivers. 3 million days is a long time, and the resulting information and relationship gap leaves plenty of time for anyone and everyone to become a power seeker. Many characters will even remark on how the others have changed for the worse since Love Dies last saw them. There is, dare I say, even some systemic critique in there, which concludes that a hierarchical society like the Syndicate inherently generates mistrust, conspiracy, and abuse. It's not a coincidence that every single member of the Syndicate is a total bastard. It's by design. Bizarre, charismatic, friendly-faced bastards, but bastards nonetheless. The Council murders, and even LD's deception 8,000 years previous, are the natural end result of a society built on power. The conspiracy of the Council's death, and it's clear it's a conspiracy from the get-go, is the type of winding and elaborate mystery that just begs to be solved. There were times when I swore I'd put the game down for the night, but kept getting pulled along by my own curiosity. And what's more impressive is that the game pulls a straight-up Breath of the Wild and allows you to jump straight into the final trials right at the start. You can, if you want, call court into session as soon as Love Dies arrives on the island. You'll have no evidence, obviously, and be incapable of convicting anyone except the citizen who's obviously being scapegoated, but you can do it. Similarly, you're allowed to start the trials anytime thereafter. If you think you've got all the evidence you need, if you think you've got everything figured out, there's nothing stopping you. For this reason, the game reiterates one idea throughout. There's a difference between facts and truth. People construct truths using facts. All the evidence in the world isn't going to solve anything if no one pieces it together to create a truth. As such, the game lets you construct your truth whenever and however you like. Without spoiling anything, this results in my favorite element of the trials. You can't prove anything. You can reasonably construct an explanation for what happened, you can get a conviction, and you might even get a confession. But you can't know anything for sure. You just have to believe the truth you've constructed is the right one. If you have enough evidence, you can convict anyone of anything. Doesn't mean they did it, or even that you think they did. It just means that's what you've decided is the truth which will now be acted upon. Personally, my goal in the trials was to convict as many people as I reasonably could, because I'd concluded that effectively everyone was, in some way, guilty. So when the opportunity arose to nail someone who hadn't been convicted of anything yet, I took it, and I was satisfied as hell every time. It's even possible to get multiple convictions off a single accusation, given the right context, and I utilized that to its fullest. That was my truth, that everyone was guilty. And because I was thorough, and as far as I know, picked up every single piece of evidence available, I was able to construct that truth. Not everyone ended up on the chopping block, but everyone got theirs in some form or another. Do I really know if everything I did was correct? No, absolutely not, and I don't think I'm supposed to know. But it was the outcome I wanted, and that'll have to be good enough. Spoilers from here on out, but in case you hadn't noticed, I highly recommend this game, so please check it out if you can before listening to me spoil it. Both unfolding the plot and getting to intimately know all the actors involved is a real joy. This is probably all going to sound like gibberish anyway if you haven't played the game, so do it. It's only $20 and it's on PC and Switch. Timecode on screen for when spoilers end. As it turns out, it was everyone. Everyone was, in some capacity, in on it. Crimson Acid might not have known what Witness to the End wanted with that key to the second Holy Seal, but she sold it to him, and that's that. Doom Jazz might not have known why Sam was snooping around in his clinic, but by neglecting to look into it, he allowed Sam to steal Kafka Memory's blood vial and break through the third Holy Seal. And those two are the only ones I couldn't reasonably convict of anything. Still, when granted the power after the trials, I did choose to exile both of them for the good of Perfect 25. But the question is, does Lady Lovedies, or the player, deserve that kind of extrajudicial power? Exiling isn't as far as you can go. You can execute anyone who went unconvicted and unexecuted during the trial. And I don't think the game is violating its themes by letting you do that, or serving an easy out for players who misplayed the trials. It's just being consistent in the way the Syndicate distributes power. That is, arbitrarily and absolutely. Lovedies is the investigator, her construction of the truth is unquestionable, and the authority that Judge grants her is immutable, because Judge has just been given that power. Not even Carmelina Silence, the Syndicate's leader at the time, has the ability to contradict Judge or Lovedies. The game has dialogue wherein Lovedies herself condemns the death sentence as classist and counterproductive. But even if you choose that dialogue, she'll still execute anyone who's convicted. And remember how I said for the good of Perfect 25? Because that name, Perfect 25, isn't based on any factual evidence that the 25th Island sequence will be the perfect and final one. Carmelina says it will be, but One Last Kiss proves that her plan to repel future demon invasions is deeply flawed. Perfect 25 is a colloquial name, possibly something Carmelina made up herself for her own benefit as the architect, since hyping up the next island sequence positions her to take a seat on the council like she wants. The idea that eliminating a few rogue elements from the Syndicate, a few bad apples so to speak, will lead to a Perfect 25 is just nonsense. Like I said, the Syndicate is rotten to the core. These bad apples are part of a spoiled bunch. Lovedies herself isn't exactly perfect either. I mean, she did get deceived by Damned Harmony and was exiled for it until Judge had no choice but to bring her back. You could easily track her entire motivation to solve the case as being a means to end her exile, which happens no matter how the trials resolve, since Henry Division gets nailed even if you fail entirely. Exile or execute everyone else afterward and she's got a clean break. Dino Nigate makes this point perfectly. A person born to a member of the Syndicate, born and raised his entire life for the sole purpose of executing a conspiracy to kill the Council. Carmelina, had she gotten away with this, would have gone on to Perfect 25 without issue. As if she'd suddenly stopped being a monster once she got there. As if the entire rest of the Syndicate already on Perfect 25 are flawless. As if the need for an investigator to be present on Perfect 25 doesn't contradict the entire concept of perfection. And I think what's so amazing about the way the plot unfolds is that two conspiracies, designed to accomplish the exact same goal, end up foiling one another. Each side constantly rats out the other to try and take the heat off themselves. If none of them had ever talked, ever tried to scapegoat someone else for their crimes, they'd have gotten away with it. Everyone would have gotten exactly what they wanted. Carmelina would be on the council, Witness would have his fanatical doctrine put into practice, and so on. But they constantly feed LD clues to try and exonerate themselves. And it's not because they're stupid, it's because the Syndicate itself is so unbelievably fucked that not one, but two independent mass murder conspiracies, both involving multiple of the highest ranking members of their own organization, sprung up underneath them, without them even noticing. Because they were locked away behind the Holy Seals, because they insisted on absolute paranoid privacy, neither side of the conspiracy knew the other had been involved. Because Judge has absolute power over the law, they were able to bring in Lovedies when no one expected it. At the end of the day, it's not Witness to the End, or Carmelina, or Dino Nigate, or the killer demon who killed the Council. The Council killed themselves. Hot damn, this game is good. Even if you sat through the spoiler section without having played the game, I still recommend picking it up. It's vibin', it's jammin', it's dark, it's funny, it's surreal, and I just love exploring a well-crafted 3D environment like this. I've kinda always had a love for environments that feel like they're out of bounds, ever since I played Shadow of the Colossus as a kid, and this game really scratched that itch. God help me for this comparison, but it almost feels inspired by egg-like games, like The Fantastic Game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look it up. I couldn't do it justice if I tried. It just vibed with me in a really great way. I mean, I could complain about the finicky jumping controls, but what do I care? Game's perfect, play it. I'm gonna start telling people in real life that my name is Animal Jayson, because I wish my name were some cool shit like Lady Lovedies or Witness to the End, and I'm gonna make that happen.